Hi everyone! This is video 3 in the mini-series about why your evidence isn't evidence, and I want to talk today about prophecy. I've heard so many times that there's fulfilled prophecies in the Bible and in the Quran. Typically, when atheists are met with this, they usually respond with all of the failed prophecies in either of those books, but I don't really want to talk about that because it doesn't really suit the purpose of this mini-series. What I do want to talk about is that prophecy isn't really prophecy. It's a vague comment on the future that people retroactively fit to make it seem like it applies to a current situation. In fact, you can make prophecy apply to a lot of different things. Now, a lot of people will tell you prophecy is purposely vague, and it's that way because you can use it to make it sound like it applies to a lot of different things. And that's true. If I was going to be giving prophecy as sort of a ruse, or even if I really believed that I was receiving the gift of prophecy or prophetic thoughts, I would be as vague as I could. So that way, even subconsciously, that way I would be right about something, and I wouldn't cause anybody's faith to waver. Even if you're specific, though, people can actually change that around to apply to all sorts of things. And this happened at church. And it's probably happened at your church too, or if you've ever encountered a Christian who wanted to talk about prophecy and you've used this against them or as a failed prophecy. And that is when Jesus said in the Bible that this generation shall not pass until all of these things have began. And I'll link this in the details section below, but it's a website called gotquestions.org, and it's about questions people have about the Bible, and then people answer them. So the question is, what did Jesus mean when he said, this generation shall not pass? And the whole quote is, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. All these things here are signs of the end times, or the start of the end times. Oddly enough, if you read this, it's a response of like 4 or 5 paragraphs. If you read all of this, for the first big section of it, it's just explaining how this totally didn't happen. This is a completely wrong, failed prophecy. And I actually had to double check because as I was reading, none of this in any way was in favor of a Christian worldview or validating the Bible or validating scripture. And I actually had to double check that I was on a Christian site, not an atheist site. And I continued to read after I found out, yes, this is in fact a Christian site. And so it says that the main problem with the dual fulfillment interpretation, which some people have, so it actually talks about the single fulfillment interpretation and the dual fulfillment interpretation, and how the Bible, or how Jesus has failed to live up to both. And so it says, the main problem with the dual fulfillment interpretation is that it does not harmonize with Jesus' statement that all these things will take place in this generation. Therefore, it is better to understand this generation as referring to the generation alive when the end times events are actually occurring. Essentially, Jesus is saying that once the events of the end times begin, they will happen quickly. The age of grace has continued for a very long time, but when the time for judgment finally arrives, things will be wrapped up post-haste. And they say that this is echoed in other parts of Scripture. Let's go back up. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. That's not really up for interpretation. If I'm talking to people, I'm telling them this generation will not pass. I'm talking to them. I'm saying these guys aren't going to die before all these events take place. All of these events are going to take place pretty soon. If I meant what is interpreted here to harmonize with the idea that the Bible is inerrant, if I meant that, that's what I'm going to say. Truly, when these events start, they're going to happen quickly. And as soon as they start, the generation at the time isn't even going to have a chance to die before all of these events just pass. That's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say this generation here that's listening to my words, none of y'all are going to die before this happens. I'm not going to say that if that's not what I mean, especially if I'm an all-knowing God man. That's not going to make a lot of sense. But let's look at the vague prophecy. I have one here. It's 5 biblical prophecies that were fulfilled in 2017 and 5 more expected in 2018. So there's 10 here. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to go through just one of them right now. So Number 1, Jerusalem as a place of assembly for non-Jews. So the Bible quote is from Zechariah 14:16. All who survive of all those nations that come against Jerusalem shall make a pilgrimage year by year to bow to the King, Lord of hosts, and to observe Sukkot. And so the explanation here. In 2017, Jerusalem became a place of assembly, a house of prayer for all nations, Jews and non-Jews alike, precisely as prophesied in Zechariah. Tourism to Jerusalem skyrocketed, with arrivals climbing by 25% compared to the 2016 and bringing in $5.8 billion of revenue. Such assembly was particularly evident during the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, when tens of thousands of Christian tourists arrived to Jerusalem. According to Rabbi Tully Weiss, fulfilling the prophetic vision for how Sukkot will be observed in the end of days, non-Jewish participation in the Feast of Tabernacles played a significant role in bringing Jews closer to celebrating Sukkot the way that it is described in the books of the prophet, as it will be celebrated in the end of times. I would be much more impressed if it said, all who survive of all those nations that came up against Jerusalem shall, in 2017 of the Gregorian calendar, make a pilgrimage starting from that time and continuing on year by year to bow to Yahweh and to observe Sukkot. Now notice what they said here. Tourism skyrocketed. Great. That in no way says I recognize the God of the Jews and I'm here during Sukkot. Now, Sukkot, great, says that such assembly was particularly evident during the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, when tens of thousands of Christian tourists arrived to Jerusalem. Let's call it like it is. Christianity is a Jewish offshoot cult. So to say Jews and non-Jews, when I hear Jews and non-Jews are going to assemble and bow to the King of the Jews, to the God of the Jews, or I should say, and it's going to happen during this holiday, I'm expecting Jews and people who in no way believe in anything that the Jewish people believe. They're all going to recognize how amazing the Jewish God is, and they're all going to come to Jerusalem just to worship this guy during this holiday. I'm not thinking Jews and people that are also from a religion that is related to Judaism are going to come together. Notice it said Christian tourists. You know the other Jewish offshoot cult, Islam? I didn't see anything in there about Muslim tourists. This doesn't seem like a very impressive prophecy fulfillment to me, does it? And notice how it had to happen in the year before. So this was written in 2018, and this is talking about 2017. Actually, let me double check that. Yes, 2018, January 5th. It doesn't say anything about a prediction. It says something very vague that could happen in the future, and then somebody, after the event happened, read that and said, aha, this is how it applies to that event. Another one. Eclipse signifies storms and trouble for the king of the east. If it sounds like I'm reading this for the first time, I am. Yea, you shall leave in joy and be led home secure. Before you, mount and hill shall shout aloud, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Isaiah 55:12. Before reading their response, what does that sound like? It sounds like the hills have eyes. It sounds like these things are literally coming alive to rejoice that you shall leave in joy and be led home secure, which looks like it's probably referring to Jewish people going back to Israel. That literally everything is going to become animated as a demonstration of the miraculous power of the all-powerful Yahweh, and that they will sing the praises and glory of Yahweh. So let's see how it was fulfilled in 2017. August solar eclipse. I wasn't expecting anything about a solar eclipse. August solar eclipse came precisely at the beginning of the Hebrew month of Elul. Rabbi Yosef Berger, the rabbi of King David's tomb on Mount Zion, connected this to a prophecy written in a century-old mystic text of an eclipse occurring precisely at this time that will be followed by storms and trouble for the king of the east, who the rabbi identified as the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Rabbi Berger maintained that North Korea will suffer a loss if its leader continues to taunt the U.S. president. Rabbi Berger went on to explain that in Jewish mysticism, the moon represents the Jewish people and the sun represents non-Jews. Thus, Rabbi Berger viewed the solar eclipse as a prophecy that Israel will be renewed and come back from exile to rise again. there were so many things I want to say, and all of them are going to sound cruel, rude, condescending, dismissive. I'm trying to figure out I'm reading this again. Like, did I misread something? Did I read a verse and then I'm reading like the wrong prophetic interpretation? It specifically says, "You will leave in joy and be led home secure. Before you, mount and hill shall shout aloud, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands." And then it's talking about a solar eclipse that somebody else used as a different prophecy based on Kim Jong-un. There you have it. You can literally make prophecy say whatever you want. I'm not making this up. And it's not just from the Bible. It's from the Quran as well. I've got one just like hanging out here. So let's see what we can figure out. This is from Surah 16:8. "And he has created horses, mules, and donkeys for you to ride and use for show. And he has created other things of which ye have no knowledge." What is that a prophecy of? Transportation. I mean, to me, if I was reading this as prophecy, I would say something like, "He created other things of which we have no knowledge." Like different animals? Or like different animals we can ride? Maybe like a whale? Or something like that? How he has created other things of which ye have no knowledge. And then the source that I took it from was an explanation that this referred to cars, airplanes, rocket ships that Allah didn't create, humans created. I mean, let's see if we can find a different one. Let's see. Okay. "Their skins will bear witness against them as to what they have been doing." Surah 41:21. "The fingerprint systems at borders, criminal investigation cells, and immigration centers prove the fulfillment of this Quranic prophecy." It's pretty interesting, I've got to say. Skins bearing witness against them. Pretty interesting. Okay? So I actually, did what everybody tells me to do as an atheist, not cherry pick and actually read the context. And if you actually read the context of Surah, the 41st chapter, it basically is saying that there's a bunch of atheists that are rejecting God, or a bunch of non-believers, I should say. It doesn't specifically says atheists. Let's see. So, "We gave them guidance." This is starting in 18. "We gave them guidance, but they preferred blindness to guidance. So the calamity of a humiliating punishment seized them on account of what they had earned." 19. "And we saved those who believed and acted righteously." 20. "Till, when they reach it, their ears and their eyes and their skins..." And on the day when the enemies of Allah will be gathered together and driven to the fire, they will be goaded on. 21. "Till, when they reach it, their ears and their eyes and their skins will bear witness against them as to what they had been doing." So this is basically a punishment. And if you actually read further up, I just, for the sake of brevity, left that part out. But it's basically talking about how at the end of life, on Judgment Day, the people who didn't follow Allah are going to be punished. And they're led into this fire. And as they're being led into a fire, it pretty specifically says their ears and their eyes and their skins will bear witness against them as to what they had been doing. It has nothing to do with physical bodies that are implicating people in crimes of this earth. It has to do with, I guess you could say, a physical idea of a spiritual body that is, or I guess a physical body, depending on how you believe that Judgment Day is going to happen. But either way, it has to do with responding to this procession to hell, essentially. And that the people themselves are going to be saying, well, we didn't do this, why don't you show mercy on us? And every part of their body is going to be saying, these are all the horrible things that you did. And it actually talks more about how these things were done against Allah with the idea that Allah would never find out. And so this whole idea of them like trying to keep it a secret, it comes out. Their body sings witness against them. about all the terrible things, all the horrible sins that they've done. This has nothing at all to do with being on Earth. And notice that 21 in the... This is on the same website, too, by the way, alislam.org. It says, their skins will bear witness against them as to what they had been doing. That's the quote that it gives us. But when you actually click on the verse, till when they reach it, their ears and their eyes and their skins will bear witness against them as to what they had been doing. I guess you could talk about retinal scanners to show that you're a criminal. I'm not sure. But their ears, why would they leave that out of the prophecy? Why would you have to not only cherry pick a prophecy verse out of a larger chapter, but cut that verse as well to suit a prophecy? So this is not only retrofitting prophecy, is what I had mentioned earlier, but it's actually doing it to the point that they're just chopping it up in order to make it sound more prophetic. The next one, pollution. Okay? I haven't read these. This one here. Corruption has spread on land and sea because of what men's hands have wrought. One of the interpretations of the above verse of the Holy Quran is the environmental pollution caused by human being, and that is spread both in land and sea due to our own inventions, i.e. fumes from chimneys of factories, chemical and nuclear waste, huge traffic in the cities, noise and creation of ozone hole are manifest testimonies of the fulfillment of this prophecy. So notice it says one of the interpretations, and then it says, and it's totally fulfilled. Corruption has spread on land and sea. I wouldn't refer to pollution as corruption. I would refer to pollution as pollution. And an all-knowing deity would as well, because they would know that's what we're talking about. The idea of dirtying one's area is not a new idea. The idea of ruining the land or causing choking air with too much burning around you, that is not a new idea. That is something that existed at this time. To cause damage to your water, to cause damage to your land, deforestation. This was a problem in ancient India, deforestation. Ashoka the Great actually had banned deforestation. Problems with the environment have existed pretty much as soon as we settled down into cities. Pollution's not a new idea. And so to refer to it as corruption as opposed to environmental destruction, pollution specifically, damage to the air and damage to the land. To refer to it as corruption makes me think of corruption, political problems because people are greedy. I would actually totally interpret that, like you could actually more accurately interpret this verse by saying that people are sinful and they've spread corruption everywhere, even on the sea, which we can think of as like Navy ships or something. But instead they chose to totally go a different route here, and they did. They were able to fit it to whatever they liked. I don't even have to click on this to check if they use it in context or not. Just the part that has been given here is enough. Genetic engineering. They will alter Allah's creation. That's it? They will alter Allah's creation? The Holy Quran has prophesied the plastic surgery, genetic engineering, and cloning in this short and concise sentence. No. If it said they will alter Allah's creation with knives and artificial skin, if they said that they are going to pervert the natural process of breeding with slicing up the things so small that Allah has given as blueprints or something. You know, if they can't explain what DNA is, they can kind of try to explain it in words that people might understand. That would be really impressive. But instead, they'll alter the creation. I mean, you could talk about building a tunnel is altering Allah's creation. Putting in a dam is altering Allah's creation. All of those, by the way, have existed before Islam was even created. So before the Quran even existed, people have been altering Allah's creation. It's not really impressive. It's not even a prophecy. It's just like, hey, people are changing stuff. That doesn't predict anything. So let's go to what I've been using in the past two videos, which is aliens. People that believe that aliens are communicating with us or trying to communicate with us. And it came to pass, when the men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and bare children unto them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So this is the idea that aliens have communicated with us. And I guess it is being used as a prophecy. So for some people, it's not talking about the past, it's actually talking about the future. And they believe things like aliens are going to mix with us genetically. And they use this verse or this passage out of the Bible from Genesis 6 to basically talk about this idea of alien abductions, that there are genuinely people that believe that aliens are abducting humans to create genetic experiments where they impregnate or they use genetic material from a human and mix it with genetic material from an alien. And they produce viable offspring. And sometimes these people are able to be abducted by the same aliens, so that way they can try to forge a relationship, like with the, weekend visitations, basically, with their alien human offspring. You probably don't believe that, do you? Probably not. You probably don't believe that the Bible is talking about aliens and genetic experiments as a prophetical concept. Explain to me how that is wrong, but the way that you have interpreted the Bible or you have interpreted the Quran is correct. Now, I've explained here in these examples from the Bible, these examples from the Jewish understanding of the Torah, the Quran itself, I've explained how these don't really make a lot of sense. It should be obvious that these are just looking back and trying to fit a passage in the book to a current event. If you don't see that, can you see that someone is doing that with aliens and Genesis? If you can see that they're just simply making up what they want, they're just interpreting what they want, and that's how they're doing it, then why can you not see the same thing is happening with your own religion? So, if you, in other words, do not accept this as prophecy of alien, human, genetic hybrids, then why would someone outside of your religion accept those prophecies as prophecies that validate your religious belief? And again, if you think this person is obviously silly and wrong, explain how your interpretation or these interpretations from your religious book are not also that. Explain how they are different in a way that is verifiable, a way that is understandable, a way that is rational and logical to someone who is outside of your religious belief. If that's hard for you to think about, like what would convince an atheist, go back to Alien Guy. What could Alien Guy tell you to convince you that his interpretation of biblical prophecy or his perception of biblical prophecy and how it relates to his belief in aliens, what would he tell you to show that he's accurate in that interpretation? How would he convince you that he is accurate in that interpretation? What kind of evidence would you need? Then provide that evidence for us. If you cannot do that, ask yourself why you accept this as evidence at all. So that's it for prophecy. Hope this has been fun. It's a little clunky. I know it's kind of a longer video, just because I wanted to approach this fresh. So I did look at a couple of the prophecies first, but I decided to go ahead and just read on as I was in the middle of it, because I just wanted to see with fresh eyes, without reading anything else, without trying to look up the verses, without trying to read the context, without trying to understand anything else at all. What do these so-called prophecies appear to say? How are they interpreting them? And what are all the things firing off in my head for why this doesn't seem like it necessarily has to be a prophecy? So hopefully this will be helpful to some people. Please feel free to post in the comments section below stuff that you're curious about, if it is evidence or what constitutes evidence, or this is evidence that you've been presented as an atheist and these are the reasons you can't believe it. Any other questions, comments, that's also accepted. If you want to check out my Patreon, that's cool too. That's in the details section below, as is a bunch of different ways to contact me. Like there's my Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. But as always, thanks for listening.